Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and click that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of our future dives.
You got it.
Today we are diving headfirst into the fascinating history of the Indian National Congress.
The INC.
Most of you have probably heard the name, but how many of you really know its journey?
Right.
This dive is perfect if you love history or if you are preparing for the UPSC exam, especially that GS1 Modern Indian History section.
Absolutely.
We're going to unpack the INC's incredible journey from its founding in 1885 all the way to Indian independence.
You know, it's interesting. The INC is often seen as the driving force behind India's independence movement.
Yeah.
But how did a group that started as a relatively small gathering of intellectuals transform into this massive nationwide force for change?
Right.
That's what we are going to unravel today.
Exactly. Like, did the British actually have a hand in creating the very organization that would ultimately lead to their exit from India? And how did a group initially dominated by lawyers end up mobilizing millions?
Yeah.
There's so many layers to this story.
Absolutely. And understanding the INC's evolution is key to understanding modern India itself.
Yeah.
It's not just a political story. It's
Yeah.
a story about social change, ideological debates,
Yeah.
and the aspirations of an entire nation.
Okay, so before we get to the INC's official formation in 1885, let's set the stage a little bit. I think it's important to remember that the INC didn't just appear out of thin air.
Right.
What was happening in India during the years leading up to its founding? Were there any other movements or organizations that kind of laid the groundwork for the INC?
You're spot on about that. The decades before the INC saw a rise in various socio-religious reform movements,
Okay.
each contributing to a growing sense of Indian nationalism.
Heck.
You had groups like the Brahmo Samaj pushing for social reform, challenging traditional norms, and the Arya Samaj advocated for a revival of Vedic Hinduism, prompting discussions about Indian identity and self-rule.
So these were like the early tremors before the earthquake,
Exactly.
kind of getting people to think about these bigger issues of identity and economy.
Exactly. And this is where the figure of A.O. Hume enters the picture.
Right.
He was a retired British civil servant,
Oh, wow.
and he played a pivotal role in the INC's formation in 1885.
Wait, hold on. A British guy helping establish an organization that would eventually challenge British rule?
Yeah,
That seems a bit contradictory, doesn't it?
it does, and that's where the safety valve theory comes into play.
Okay.
Some historians believe that Hume's intention was to create a controlled platform for Indian dissent.
Interesting.
It's almost like he was trying to provide a pressure release valve
Oh.
to prevent a larger, more uncontrollable uprising.
So the INC was like a way to let Indians voice their grievances without actually threatening British control.
That's one interpretation.
Okay.
And it's been debated for decades.
Yeah.
Was it purely a way for the British to maintain control? Or did Hume genuinely believe in fostering dialogue and reform? It's a complex question, and there are other theories too.
Right.
Some argue that Hume saw the INC as a way to channel Indian aspirations toward constructive engagement with the British government.
Okay, now I find it fascinating that the very first INC session was initially planned for Pune, but had to be moved to Bombay at the last minute due to a cholera outbreak.
Can you imagine the logistical scramble?
Oh my God.
But even with the venue change, 72 delegates from across India managed to assemble.
Wow.
That in itself was a powerful statement. It showed that this wasn't just a regional gathering, it was a sign of a burgeoning national consciousness.
Yeah, and speaking of powerful statements,
Right.
W.C. Banerjee, the first president of the INC, clearly laid out the organization's objectives,
Right.
promoting unity among Indians, tackling pressing issues, and planning for future action.
His words were carefully chosen, reflecting a desire for progress within the existing framework.
Okay.
But even in those early years, you can see the seeds of what the INC would become.
Right, and I'm curious about the makeup of the early INC membership. You mentioned earlier that it was dominated by lawyers. Why was that?
Think about it. Lawyers were well-educated, articulate,
Yeah.
and familiar with the intricacies of the legal system.
Right.
They were naturally well-equipped to advocate for political rights and reforms.
So they were kind of the legal minds behind the movement.
Precisely.
Mm.
But this also highlights a crucial point.
Go ahead.
While the INC aimed for national representation, its early membership was heavily skewed towards this educated urban elite. Other groups, like the peasantry or the aristocracy, were largely absent.
So the early INC primarily reflected the concerns and aspirations of this particular social group, which would definitely shape its initial character and approach.
It's a critical insight, especially for UTSC aspirants.
Yeah.
You need to understand how the INC's composition influenced its early strategies and how that changed over time.
Makes sense. Okay, so we've got the setting, we've got the players, we've got the broad aims. Now let's dive into some of those early INC sessions that really set the stage for the movement to come. Let's focus on the period between 1886 and 1907 and pick out some key highlights.
Great idea. This period is packed with fascinating developments, from internal debates to significant milestones that would shape the INC's trajectory. Let's start with the Calcutta session in 1886.
Okay.
One of the major outcomes was the decision to establish provincial Congress committees across the country.
Now that's a pretty big step, right? It
Yeah.
signifies a move towards a more structured and nationwide organization.
Absolutely. It demonstrates the INC's growing ambition and its efforts to build a truly national presence. And just a year later, in 1887, we see Badruddin Tyabji becoming the first Muslim president of the INC.
Now this is interesting. It suggests an early attempt at inclusivity, reaching out to different religious communities. How significant was this in the context of the time?
It was a significant step. The INC wanted to project itself as a representative body for all Indians, regardless of their religious background.
Right.
However, as we'll see, the path to true inclusivity within the nationalist movement was long and complex.
Right. And it's fascinating to see how these early efforts would play out over the coming decades. Now, I have to bring up something that really caught my eye. The fact that in 1888, George Ewell became the first English president of the INC, followed by Sir William Wedderburn, another Englishman, in 1889. What's going on here? Why were the British so involved in these early years?
It's a question that historians continue to grapple with.
Yeah.
Some see this British involvement as further evidence for the safety valve theory, suggesting that the British were actively trying to manage the INC.
Okay.
Others argue that it reflects a genuine belief in fostering dialogue and reform within the existing system.
Okay, so we have these competing interpretations, and it really highlights the complexities of this period.
Yeah.
The INC was navigating a delicate balance between pushing for change and working within the colonial framework.
Exactly. And this brings us to another significant development, the Surat session of 1907, which witnessed a major split within the INC between the moderates and the extremists. Welcome back to our deep dive into the Indian National Congress. When we left off, the INC was facing internal divisions, a sign of the growing debate about how best to achieve its goals.
Yeah.
But this period also saw the emergence of new leaders and strategies that would profoundly shape the movement's future.
It's like the INC was going through a bit of an identity crisis, right?
Yeah.
Trying to figure out its place in the larger struggle for independence.
That's a great way to put it. And, for our listeners preparing for the UPSC,
Yeah.
this internal struggle within the INC is a key area to understand. It often comes up in those GS1 Modern Indian History questions.
Okay, so let's get into it. We left off with the split between the moderates and the extremists in 1907. Can you unpack those two viewpoints a bit more? What were their core differences?
The moderates, as the name suggests, favored a more gradual and constitutional approach to achieving self-rule. They believed in working within the existing system, petitioning the British government for concessions and reforms. Think of figures like Dadabhai Naoroji or Gopal Krishna Gokhale. They were brilliant legal minds who advocated for dialogue and incremental progress.
Okay, so a more patient, step-by-step approach.
Right.
What about the extremists? What set them apart?
The extremists, on the other hand, grew increasingly impatient with what they saw as the slow pace of change.
Okay.
They argued for more assertive, even revolutionary methods to achieve complete independence.
Right.
They believed in mobilizing the masses, appealing to nationalist sentiments,
Mm-hmm.
and even resorting to boycotts and other forms of direct action.
So a more radical approach focused on direct action and mass mobilization.
Mm-hmm.
Were there any key figures associated with this group?
Absolutely. Think of leaders like Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Lala Lajpat Rai, or Bipin Chandrapal.
Okay.
They were powerful orators who inspired a new generation of nationalists with their fiery speeches and calls for complete self-rule.
This ideological clash must have caused quite a stir within the INC. Did this split last long, or was there any attempt to bridge this divide?
Well, as with any political movement, there were moments of unity and division.
Right.
Interestingly, the Lucknow session of 1916 marked a reunion between the moderates and the extremists. They recognized that a united front was essential to effectively challenge British rule.
So they put their differences aside, realizing that the larger goal of independence was paramount.
Precisely. And the Lucknow session was also significant for another reason.
Okay.
It witnessed a pact between the Congress and the All India Muslim League. This alliance aimed to present a united front against British rule.
That's a huge development.
Hmm.
It shows that the INC was not only trying to bridge internal divides, but also reaching out to other groups and communities to build a broader coalition for independence.
Exactly. It was a recognition that India's diverse population needed to come together to effectively challenge colonial rule.
Hang on.
And, this idea of Hindu-Muslim unity is a recurring theme in the INC's history, one that often comes up in UPSC exams.
It's a critical point, and it highlights the complex social and political landscape that the INC had to navigate.
Yeah.
Now, this period also saw the rise of some remarkable women leaders within the INC.
Absolutely. In 1917, Annie Besant became the first woman president of the INC.
Wow.
It was a powerful symbol of the changing demographics and increasing inclusivity within the movement.
Right.
Women were playing a more active role in the struggle for independence, and their contributions were finally being recognized.
And this trend continued, with Sarojini Naidu becoming the first Indian woman president of the INC in 1925.
Yeah.
These women were trailblazers, inspiring generations of female leaders to come.
They were truly remarkable figures.
Yeah.
And this is where I think it's essential to connect these developments back to the broader historical context. This period, the early 20th century,
Wow.
saw the rise of various social reform movements focused on women's rights and education.
Okay.
These movements contributed to a growing awareness of women's issues and their role in shaping the nation's future.
So the INC's increasing inclusivity wasn't happening in isolation. It was part of a larger social transformation.
Precisely. And this is something that UPSC aspirants should keep in mind. Understanding the interplay between social, political, and economic forces is crucial for analyzing historical events.
Now, speaking of influential figures, we can't talk about the INC without mentioning Mahatma Gandhi. His arrival on the scene was a game changer.
Absolutely. Gandhi's philosophy of nonviolent resistance, or satyagraha,
Right.
would profoundly reshape the INC's approach. He brought a new perspective and strategy to the fight for independence, one that resonated deeply with the Indian masses.
And in 1920, the INC, under Gandhi's leadership, launched the non-cooperation movement, a major campaign of civil disobedience.
Right.
This movement called for Indians to boycott British institutions and products.
Yeah.
What was the impact of this movement?
The non-cooperation movement was a watershed moment. It demonstrated the power of mass mobilization and nonviolent resistance, forcing the British to acknowledge the strength of the nationalist movement. However, it's also important to remember that the movement was eventually called off by Gandhi following an incident of violence at Chari Chara.
Ah, yes, the Chari Chara incident. A reminder that even in a movement committed to nonviolence, maintaining control and discipline on such a massive scale was a challenge.
Exactly. And for UPSC aspirants, understanding the complexities and nuances of the non-cooperation movement, including its eventual suspension, is crucial.
Now, moving on, the 1929 Lahore session saw the INC adopt the historic Purna Swaraj resolution demanding complete independence from British rule. This was a bold and decisive step, wasn't it?
Absolutely. It marked a definitive shift from demands for dominion status within the British Empire to a call for complete sovereignty. It was a declaration that India was ready to chart its own course, free from colonial rule.
And it wasn't just about political independence. The 1931 Karachi session saw the adoption of a resolution outlining fundamental rights and socio-economic principles for an independent India.
That's right. The INC recognized that true freedom went beyond simply replacing British rule.
Yeah.
It was about creating a just and equitable society for all Indians. They were already thinking about what an independent India should look like, laying the groundwork for the nation's future constitution and social policies.
So they were envisioning a future where political freedom went hand in hand with social and economic justice.
Precisely. And this holistic vision of independence is another key aspect that UPSC aspirants should be aware of.
Now, I want to touch upon the 1937 Phase Per session. This session was unique because it was the first one held in a rural setting. What was the significance of this shift?
This signifies a deliberate effort by the INC to connect with the rural masses, the backbone of Indian society.
Okay.
It shows that the movement was expanding its base, reaching out beyond the urban elite.
Yeah.
And becoming more representative of the diverse Indian population.
So the INC was evolving, becoming more inclusive and representative.
Yeah.
But even with this progress, internal debates and tensions continued. The late 1930s saw the emergence of Subhas Chandra Bose as a prominent leader within the INC.
Right.
He was elected president in 1938 and again in 1939.
Right.
Bose's presidency represented a more radical and assertive faction within the INC. He had differing views on the path to independence, which led to disagreements with Gandhi and other leaders.
Yeah.
This ultimately led to his resignation from the INC in 1939.
Yeah.
So even as the movement gained momentum, there were still internal debates about strategy and ideology. It shows that political movements are rarely monolithic.
Exactly. And understanding these internal dynamics is essential for grasping the complexities of the Indian independence movement.
Now, as we move into the 1940s, the world is engulfed in World War II, which had a profound impact on India and the independence movement.
Indeed, World War II created both challenges and opportunities for the INC. On the one hand, it put a strain on resources and diverted attention from the independence struggle.
Right.
On the other hand, it weakened the British Empire and created a global context more favorable to decolonization.
It was a pivotal moment in history, and the INC had to navigate these turbulent waters carefully.
Absolutely. And their response to the war and its aftermath would shape the final chapter in their struggle for independence. But that, my friend, is a story for part 3 of our deep dive.
All right, deep divers, we're back and ready to uncover the final chapter of the INC's journey to Indian independence.
The stakes are high. The world has just emerged from World War II.
Yep.
The British Empire is weakened, and the demand for independence is reaching a fever pitch.
So let's talk about those final steps toward freedom.
Mm-hmm.
In 1946, the British government sent a cabinet mission to India
Right.
to try and hammer out a plan for a smooth transition to independence.
Right.
But this wasn't going to be a simple handover of power, was it?
No, not at all. The situation was incredibly complex. You had the INC, led by figures like Jawaharlal Nehru and Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, pushing for a unified, independent India.
Right.
But there were also growing calls for a separate Muslim state championed by the Muslim League under Muhammad Ali Jinnah.
So the INC was facing a double challenge: negotiating with the British and trying to navigate these internal divisions within India itself.
Exactly. It was a delicate balancing act.
Yeah.
They had to hold on to their vision for a united India while also recognizing the realities of the political landscape
Right.
and the rising demand for a separate Muslim nation.
What a tense and complicated situation.
Yeah.
So what happened next? Did the cabinet mission succeed in finding a solution?
Well, the cabinet mission proposed a federal structure for India,
Right.
with a significant degree of autonomy for the provinces.
Okay.
This was seen as a compromise, a way to potentially accommodate both the INC's desire for unity and the Muslim League's demand for self-determination.
So it was like trying to find that middle ground, a way to keep everyone at the table.
Precisely. But despite initial acceptance by both the Congress and the Muslim League, the plan ultimately unraveled amidst growing distrust and escalating communal tensions.
This must have been a heartbreaking setback for those who had fought so hard for a united, independent India.
It was a time of immense turmoil and disappointment. The dream of a unified nation seemed to be slipping away.
Right.
And tragically, as we know, the partition of India and the creation of Pakistan in 1947 were accompanied by widespread violence and displacement.
It's a dark chapter in history, a reminder of the human cost of political divisions.
Indeed. But amidst the chaos and tragedy, it's essential to remember that the INC played a critical role in guiding India toward independence. Even if it wasn't the unified independence they had originally envisioned.
So on August 15, 1947, India finally achieved independence. What role did the INC play in shaping the newly independent nation?
Well, the INC now, with Jawaharlal Nehru as India's first prime minister, had a monumental task ahead of them. They had to address issues like refugee resettlement, communal violence, the integration of princely states, and the drafting of a new constitution for this fledgling democracy.
It was a period of immense challenges, but also of tremendous opportunity.
Absolutely. And the INC's vision for India went beyond just political freedom. They advocated for social justice, economic equality, and a secular democratic state. They laid the groundwork for many of the foundational principles of modern India.
So they weren't just fighting for freedom from something. They were fighting for freedom to create a better future for all Indians.
Exactly. And their legacy can be seen in the institution's policies and values that continue to shape India today.
It's an incredible journey. From a small group of intellectuals gathering in 1885 to a powerful movement that led India to independence and then guided its early years as a nation.
It's a story of perseverance, transformation, and ultimately a testament to the power of collective action and a shared vision for a better future.
And with that, we come to the end of our deep dive into the Indian National Congress. We've covered a lot of ground from its origins to its pivotal role in shaping modern India. Hopefully this has given you a deeper understanding of this remarkable organization and its lasting impact.
It's a story that has something for everyone. Whether you're a history enthusiast, a UPSC aspirant, or simply someone curious about India's past and present.
Absolutely. Yeah. And remember, history is not just about dates and events.
Right.
It's about understanding the forces, the choices, and the people who shape the world we live in.
If there's one thing to take away from this deep dive, it's that change is possible even in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges.
Yeah.
The INC's journey is a testament to that.
And speaking of journeys, we'd love to hear about yours. What stood out to you the most in this deep dive? What questions are still swirling in your mind?
Yeah.
Head over to the comments section and let us know.
We're always eager to hear your thoughts and continue the conversation. And before we sign off, a quick reminder to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more deep dives into the world's most intriguing topics.
Yes.
Until next time, keep exploring.